Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatles Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video and I hope you're all doing well. Now a couple of weeks ago, Julia, who is a subscriber to this channel, she sent me a message and said, would I do a video on the psychology of the Beatles fans? So that's you and that's me as well. And the word psychology, it sounds a little bit medical, a little bit clinical, a bit too clinical maybe for the type of videos that I do on this channel. I'm not about to lie on the couch and empty my head of all thoughts and start hugging a cushion while we go back through the mists of time and look into my Beatles psyche. I'm not going to do that, but I think what Julia was sort of striving at was more the mentality that we have for collecting and buying Beatles stuff. This is a band that split up over 50 years ago, yet we're still talking about them. We're still buying stuff made by them or by the solo Beatles, that sort of thing, because everybody has there are different levels. There's different levels of fans. Some fans are really loyal to the Beatles, but yet are only interested in the band and they don't touch the solo albums. Some buy absolutely everything, and there's different things that people can collect. Do you just collect the music? Do you collect memorabilia? Do you collect videos and DVDs, books, and all that sort of stuff? So I just want to talk about that really in this video, and why we keep going back and buying the same thing over and over again, and sort of ask the question, are we absolutely stark raving bonkers? I mean, I don't know if we're any different from the fans of any other band, because I'm not as crazy about any other band as I am about the Beatles. So I don't really know if there are fans of other bands that do exactly the same thing as we do. But it just seems that the Beatles have just been, it's been so long since the Beatles started out, and even so long since they finished as a band, yet here we all are, still talking about them, still buying their stuff. I'm coming on here twice a week and making a video to talk about them. Now I want to have some fun with this video, and I don't want to take it too seriously. I kind of want to have a little bit of a laugh at our own expense maybe, but it's difficult for me to talk about what you do. What are your limits, what are your parameters? I only know my own, so I'm going to kind of talk about it from my point of view, and obviously you can tell me about what you collect, how far you are willing to go with this band. You can tell me that down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and I always read your comments and I always respond to your comments. Also want to talk about some other aspects, like the amount of money that we spend, and are we absolutely honest with our families about how much we spend on this band? So that's kind of what I'm gonna talk about in this video. Before I do that, I just wanted to say a big hello and welcome to all the new subscribers. Been quite a few of you recently. Thanks very much for subscribing and supporting the channel in that way, and I hope you enjoy the content here. Okay, so I think really to kind of get a handle of how we got from there to here, we've got to go back to there when we first started collecting the Beatles. If you're a first generation Beatles fan and you're still here, you're still involved with this band, I totally get that, because if you were a first generation Beatles fan, you were there when it was actually happening, and you were spending your pocket money on buying Beatles records or magazines or whatever, and that is part of your growing up, part of your youth, and part of your history. And we all hanker after our youth. But what about the rest of us? The rest of us, I know that I look like a first generation Beatles fan, but I'm actually not. I would consider myself to be a second generation Beatles fan because I didn't discover the Beatles really until the mid 70s, and I know there are others that watch this channel that are from who were teenagers in the 70s as well, some in the 80s, some in the 90s, and some even in the noughties as well. So you've all got different perspective, and I'm interested in what that is. But are we absolutely crazy? So my Beatles story, it starts in the spring of 1976. I just turned 15, and if you are from the UK and you were around in 1976, you will remember 1976 as being the hottest summer that we have ever had. I don't think it rained from April to September. We literally had a drought situation here in the UK where the water company were putting up standpipes at the end of streets so people could go with buckets and bowls and collect like fresh water. We weren't allowed to have baths, we had to have showers, grown-ups weren't allowed to wash their car, and there was the hose pipe ban and all that sort of thing. And I used to walk to school with a friend of mine who lived just down the road from me, and on one journey walking to school, he was telling me about a couple of albums that his dad had brought home a while back, and he was kind of waxing lyrical about these two albums, and so I asked if I could borrow them, and he said yes. And those two albums were these two albums, the Red and the Blue album. Back then, the ultimate starter pack for anyone wanting to be introduced to Beatles music. In fact, probably they still are the ultimate starter pack for that. Certainly I would recommend those two albums as being the first listen if you're introducing someone to the Beatles. And I took these albums home, and I played the Blue album first and put on the first track, which, as you know, is Strawberry Fields Forever, and it just blew my mind. All these like unfamiliar sounds, sprinkling from my speakers, and this sort of, lone nasal voice singing as if he was at the bottom of a mine shaft about things that I had absolutely no concept of whatsoever. It literally blew my mind. And rather than going on to the next track, onto Penny Lane and Sergeant Pepper, and with a little help from my friends, I went back to the beginning of Strawberry Fields Forever and played it again, and I played it again, and I played it again, and it literally, as I say, it literally just knocked me for six. Fantastic stuff. It's weird because I guess because this is so important to me, I remember everything that happened at that time in such vivid detail. Now, obviously, I did then go on to play the rest of the album, and it was just like wondrous song after wondrous song after wondrous song, and I was absolutely sold on these two albums. I put them both on to cassette because I realized at some point my friend was going to want his records back, but within a few weeks of doing that, I bought these albums for myself, and I played them. As I say, I played them to death, and at that point, I'd kind of, I'd realised that, these two albums were not going to be enough to quench my Beatles thirst. So the next album that I went out and bought was this one, Abbey Road. This is the actual copy of Abbey Road that I bought in 1976. It's got this little tear here on the sleeve, and I'm not going to talk about the merits of Abbey Road because we all know what they are. Now, obviously, I absolutely loved Abbey Road, and I played it and I played it and I played it. But at that point, Abbey Road was already 7 years old, which made it the oldest album that I'd ever heard. And it hadn't really occurred to me up to that point to go back and listen to the music of a band that didn't even exist anymore. And it felt a little bit grown up and a little bit naughty. Previously, I was into bands like Sparks and Queen, and previously to that I'd been into glam rock, Slade and Sweet and T-Rex. But this was a different level. All my friends, that were into what we would call now classic rock and prog, and things that were current then, if you like. And here was me, like, listening to music that had been and gone from this bygone era. And I wasn't quite ready to share my secret with them at that point. Now, I had this Beatles magazine, and it was a big, like, broadsheet size magazine, kind of like a newspaper, I suppose. And the centerfold of this was a complete Beatles discography. So it had all the albums on it and all the tracks that were on the albums, all the singles and the B-sides and the EP. So I took it out of the magazine, stuck it on my bedroom wall, and I started ticking off all the songs that I already had. And, I realized that there was just so much more to explore, and I decided that I was going to get everything that this band had ever done. And I guess it was at that point that I realized that not only were the Beatles in my life, but they were my life. So I had to kind of work out a way of how I was going to get all these other albums. It was one down and sort of 12 to go. And my dad had a TV shop at that time, and I asked him if I could work there on a Saturday, to which he said yes, I could. So I used to work for him on a Saturday, and he used to pay me £5, and about 4:30, 5 o'clock on the Saturday, he used to hand me my fiver. And before it had even had a chance to acquaint itself with the inside of my jeans pocket, I was out of the door of the shop, and running down the road, about half a mile down the road, was a record shop, and I would try and get there before they shut. And LPs at that time cost £2.49, which meant I could buy two for my fiver. And so I would go in there, I'd choose my two albums, and then I'd get the bus home. I'd literally spent my wages before I'd even got home. But this carried on for a few weeks, and within a few weeks I had them all. I had all the albums. Now, as I said, the summer of 76 was the hottest one that we'd ever had. But I'm thinking to myself, ginger person, you don't want to be out in the blazing sun. What you want to be doing is being in your bedroom, playing all these Beatles records that you've newly acquired. And, it wouldn't be true to say that I spent the whole of that school summer holiday in my bedroom playing Beatles records, because obviously I did go out quite a lot. But I did spend also a lot of time in my bedroom listening to these albums and learning them and loving them, and just absorbing all this fantastic music that just had me transfixed. But when I looked at my little chart on the wall, there was still some gaps. Even though I had all the albums, there was all the B-sides to get. There was Bad Boy, which meant that I had to buy a collection of oldies but goldies just to get that one song. Very annoying. And there was also the 4 tracks from the Long Tall Sally EP. Now, as luck would have it, and I'll go on and tell you some other lucky things that happened in 1976, which made it a really great time to discover the Beatles. EMI decided to reissue all the Beatles singles in these sort of green sleeves, and that meant that all those difficult to get B-sides were not that difficult. So I could get things like You Know My Name, Look Up the Number fairly easily. Now, I didn't buy the whole set of these. The obsession was spiraling, but it wasn't spiraling that far to buy things that I already had. So I just bought the ones that I needed that had B-sides that I was missing, things like From Me to You and She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand and stuff like that. So I managed to get all the B-sides. And then, as you know, in 1976, EMI released Rock and Roll Music, which had the 4 tracks from the Long Tall Sally EP on them. And that was it. I had everything. I had all the songs. I was a Beatles completist. So as I was saying, 1976 was such a brilliant time to discover the Beatles because so many things happened in Beatles world. It was just absolutely perfect timing for me. And, I remember it all in such great detail because I suppose, it's just so important to me. Up until that point, discovering the Beatles was the most exciting thing that had happened in my life. And during those, the summer holidays, school summer holidays, the BBC started showing all the Beatles films on a Tuesday night in consecutive weeks. But apart from Magical Mystery Tour, for some reason they didn't show Magical Mystery Tour, but they showed Hard Day's Night, Help, Yellow Submarine, and Let It Be. And this is where I think I've got my first Beatles fans a completely bonkers moment, because there was no video recorders then. We didn't have a video recorder, but I felt that I needed to have some sort of souvenir of these Beatles films. So I recorded the audio from the telly with a cassette recorder and a microphone. Now, I don't know why I did that, just to have a souvenir, I suppose, but I don't think I ever listened to those cassettes of the audio from the Beatles films. But I directly relate that moment to something that would happen much later when we did have video recorders, which I call my quick Maccas on the telly phase, where I would scrabble around for a blank VHS tape and stick it in the machine, just to record any sort of fleeting Beatles related material that happened to be on the telly. Like if, Paul was on, Wogan or Parkinson, or they were showing a video on Top of the Pops, or if there was any Beatles documentaries or anything like that. I used to record everything on video, and that sort of went on for, 15, 20 years or however long it was until we stopped using video recorders. But that wasn't the only thing that happened in 1976. In 1976, Beat Publications decided to start reprinting the Beatles book, the monthly fan club book that came out in the 60s. And I've got the whole set of these, but make it clear, these aren't originals. These are the reprints that started in 1976. This was issue 1. As you can see, the date on that is May 1976. So what you got was a reprint of the original Beatles magazine, but they supplemented it with 2 or 3 pages sort of either side, which had sort of up-to-date news about the Beatles. And so I started collecting these, and it went on and on and on. There were originally 77 of these, but this series went up to issue 321. It eventually ended in June 2003, and I've just picked up a random one of the later ones. This one is from January 2001, and you can see it on the front. It says, "Will 2001 be George's year?" Well, we all know what happened to George in 2001, but these magazines, they basically was all up to date news, but they had more all current photos or later photos, also photos that they would have used for the original magazines but didn't make the cut. And they had it had all sorts of stuff in it, and I collected every one of these, and right up to 2003. And in the back of it used to have a Beatles up-to-date news section. Now this month it's written by Pete Nash, but quite often it was written by Mark Lewison. And this particular one, talks about the One album certifying gold. It's talking about this article here, Not Guilty. This is about George being stabbed, stuff like that. There was just all this one here, Get Plaque. This is where it's telling you that that John's house is Aunt Mimi's house had got like a blue National Trust plaque. So that happened in 1976 as well. So I collected all of these, and having all the music and having this going on, you would think that was like the end of the story, but really, my Beatles journey, the magical mystery tour of my Beatles journey was really just pulling out of the car park, and it was a ride that I still haven't managed to get off yet. So the music was one thing, but the music still left me with lots of unanswered questions, because I wanted to know, about this band and about these records, the inside story, all that sort of stuff. And, just looking at this album sleeve, I wondered, how did they get from being these lovable mop tops who wanted to hold your hand to these hairy hippies singing about Semolina Pilchard climbing up the Eiffel Tower? And for this, I sort of turned to books. Lennon Remembers, that's John's Rolling Stone interview from 1970, was the very first Beatles book that I read, a fascinating read that doesn't really show John in his best light. Another early book was The Longest Cocktail Party by Richard DeLillo, who was the house hippie at Apple, a very funny book. And there were quite a few books about Wings around at that time, because they'd just done the world tour and stuff. But I think my go-to, my absolute Beatles Bible right back in the early days was this book, Beatles Forever by Nicholas Schaefer. Fantastic book that came out in 1977, which covers the Beatles years and the solo years up until that point. Also, this book, The Beatles, an illustrated record by Roy Carr and Tony Tyler, not this actual version. I had the previous version to this, which has got a white cover with them in the Sgt. Pepper suits on the front, that came out in about 74 or 75. And that talks about gives a review of all the Beatles albums and all the solo albums. Not that I really agreed with hardly anything that was written in this book, but I just enjoyed reading about someone else's opinion about the music. And I read this from cover to cover over and over again. The original copy that I had, I cut all the pictures out and stuck them on my bedroom wall, so I no longer had it. And I bought this one, which is an updated version, goes up to about 81 or 82. I bought this fairly recently because I was thinking about it. I thought, I want to read it again, so I bought it again. There was also this series of books. There was this one, volume 1, which was called The Long and Winding Road, which was all about all the Beatles songs. Then there was Working Class Heroes, which is all about the solo songs up to that point. There was Paperback Writer, about all the Beatles books that were out at that point. And this one, Beatlemania, which was about all the films. And I reckon, by now I've got well over 100 books, and I've read a few that I've got rid of, but I've read them from absolute trash like Albert Goldman's books to absolute masterpieces like The McCartney Legacy or Eight Arms to Hold You, which is just a fantastic book about all the all the solo recordings going right up to about 2000 or something like that. So books were a big thing for me to collect. There was a point where I thought I'd read everything. I don't need to read anything else about the Beatles. And then something like the McCartney Legacy comes out, or Luca Parese's book about the Paul McCartney, the story behind Paul McCartney's songs. So you keep on being surprised, and they keep turning up things that you want to read. But that's how I kind of learn about the Beatles as a band and the records, what the stories behind the songs and that sort of stuff. I think for me, the Beatles came along just at the right time, because I've always thought that when you're a teenager, you fall into one of two categories. You're either twisted with raging angst and riddled with hormones that you don't know what to do with, or you don't know what you feel, or you don't know what to care about, because you don't feel or care about anything. And I think that I fell into that second category, and the Beatles did make me feel something and did make me care about something. But when you've collected all the stuff that the Beatles did as a band, is that end game? Is that the end of the story? For me, it wasn't, because I then wanted to go on and explore all the solo albums. And as you know, the solo albums are a bit of a minefield, and you kind of have to know what you're doing and tread a little bit carefully. There are some absolutely brilliant solo albums, and there are some absolute stinkers. I mean, if you thought that there were parts of the White Album that were a little bit wacky, take a deep breath and a step back before you try something like George Harrison's electronic sound. But for me, the solo albums were something that I wanted to collect. And, when the Beatles split up in 1970, everyone was a little bit cross about it. But when you think about it, when we got to 1976, if the Beatles had still been together, we may have had 5 or 6 more Beatles albums. But as far as the solo albums went, we had like 15 or 16 of them to collect. So I was quite happy about that. There was more music to explore, more music to buy. And I love that and I love the chase of the pursuing the solo albums and, digging through them, sorting out the wheat from the chaff. And there definitely is gold in those hills if you want to spend the time to look for it. And, I always loved the solo albums, and I love that diversity of how they weren't quite as good as the Beatles albums, but there was still stuff on every one of them. There was something to love at the very, very least. So I always loved it. But when you get into the solo albums, that's when the line gets a little bit blurry if you're looking to be, a completist, because does that mean you then have to buy all the records that a solo Beatle played on? For me, no, you don't. But, I do own quite a few albums by other artists that Beatles played on. Do you have to own all of Yoko Ono's albums just because John Lennon played guitar on them? And again, I would probably say no, although I do own all the albums by Yoko Ono that John Lennon plays on. I would like to say that I draw the line at Beatles Children. I'd like to say it, but it would be a lie, because I do own this album by Julian Lennon, Velotti's first album, and very nice it is too. But that is the only album that I own by Beatles Children, and I probably won't be going near any albums by Beatles Children again. So that's kind of my rough outline of the solo albums. I realise that they're not for everyone, but for me, they are definitely something that I want to collect. So I thought I'd just quickly include this photo of me in my bedroom. I reckon I'm about 18 or 19 in this photo. This is the room where it all happened for me, where I discovered the Beatles and listened to them relentlessly. You can see the walls decorated with not just Beatles stuff, but mostly Beatles stuff. I can see the Band on the Run poster behind me and the London Town poster there as well. And the John's portrait photo from the White Album top centre there. And it doesn't look that different from my room that I make my videos from now. Just shows that I haven't really grown up that much, I suppose. So as we've already discussed, there are different levels of Beatles fandom and different levels of collecting. And let's make it clear, there's no right or wrong answers here. People will collect whatever they want to collect, and they will spend whatever they want to spend. It's up to them. And there's no right or wrong answers. For example, I don't collect Beatles memorabilia. I never have. I've never really been after, pencil cases and lunch boxes and stuff like that, stuff that was around in the 60s. I just never pursued memorabilia. But if you like memorabilia, I can thoroughly recommend Beatle Brad's channel. My friend Beatle Brad, he collects memorabilia in a big way, and I love looking at his collection. I just don't want to go out and try and find all this stuff. Also, Mr. Beatles Pro is also big on memorabilia as well. So 2 channels there. If you're into memorabilia, they're good channels to find stuff. There are other people who collect pressings from all over the world, different Beatles albums from that hail from different countries. I don't collect those either, although I do have a few that hail from different countries, but I don't actively go out trying to find lots of different copies from different countries. There are other people who will collect every pressing of every album. You can see them on YouTube. They'll show you an album and then they'll show you another album that is exactly the same about 3 seconds after, but the only difference is that the label is in a different font, or there's a spelling error on the label or something like that. I don't go there either, but I do buy multiple copies of the same album if they offer me something different. So just as an example, the White Album, my favourite album of them all. This was my original copy of the White Album that I bought in 1976. If you look inside it, there's no poster and there's no pictures like that inside it, because when I in a fit of not really thinking about it, decorating, I glued the poster and the portraits on my bedroom wall so they weren't removable when I left home. So that is my White Album with no poster or no pictures. Then that served me well for many years, but then they came out on Beatles came out on compact disc, so I bought the White Album, my second White Album, on CD. Fast forward to 2009, the Beatles get remastered on CD, 250 quid, lighter of wallet. That was the White Album number 3, and of course had to have the mono as well, so that was White Album number 4. 2012, the 2009 remasters came out on LP, so I bought White Album number 5, and of course in 2014 it came out in mono with the top loader album in monos on vinyl, so I bought that was White Album number 6. Then in 2018, of course, we got the Giles Martin remix of the White Album, the 6 CD edition with the book and all that and all the outtakes, so that was White Album number 7. And of course I had to get the vinyl version as well. That was White Album number 8. Now, is that bonkers? I don't know. Not for me, it's not, because different formats and different versions of the same album, that gives me something that I want to collect, and because it's my favourite album, I don't feel in the slightest bit embarrassed about owning all those copies of the White Album. I know that other people will probably own much more than 8 copies of the White Album. So owning multiple copies of the White Album, for me, is understandable, because it is my favourite album of all time by any artist ever. But what about when you start buying multiple copies of albums that are not very good? Is that absolutely bonkers? So take Pipes of Peace, for example, in my opinion, one of the worst albums in Paul's canon. This is my original copy from 1983. Then I had to buy the second copy on CD. Then there was the Archive Edition Super Deluxe box set with several CDs in it and a book and all that sort of stuff. Then I had to buy the vinyl version of the Archive collections, and that was Pipes of Peace number 4. And then there was this one. This is Pipes of Peace on silver vinyl, I think from 2017 or something like that. I bought that one and I'll show it to you because it is beautiful. Love these coloured vinyl ones. And then finally, Pipes of Peace number 6, which is also, I think, from 2017, but this is just the black vinyl version. Now, I do have an excuse for that, because I ordered the silver vinyl from a bloke off Discogs, and he sent me the black one by mistake. And when I told him about his mistake, he said, "Oh, don't worry, you can just keep the black one, don't bother sending it back to me." So 6 copies of Pipes of Peace, an album that's not very good, really, I think is pretty bonkers. Now, I wanted to talk about keeping albums sealed, because I didn't even know that keeping albums sealed was a thing until I started watching people's YouTube videos. But I had a poll on the channel a few weeks ago where I asked you if you kept albums sealed, and 4% of people that voted, there was about 200 people voted, about 4% said that they always keep a sealed copy of albums. About 35% said that they sometimes keep special albums sealed. As I say, and I didn't even know that this was a thing, and I'm interested in the reasons why people keep albums sealed. It's not something that I do. I don't really think of albums as being museum pieces. They're to be played and enjoyed. But if you do keep albums sealed, nothing wrong with that. It's your money. You're buying the records. You can do exactly what you like with them, and it's entirely up to you. But I am interested in the reasons why. Is it because you think that you might sell the records in the future, and obviously a sealed copy is worth more than an open copy, more desirable for people to buy on the secondary market? Or maybe you're keeping them for your family to inherit after you've gone, and they'll obviously sell your collection and get more money for a sealed copy. So I'm interested in the reasons why. The most bonkers thing is when it's a coloured vinyl. People are keeping coloured vinyl sealed. I would have thought the whole point of getting coloured vinyl, albums on coloured vinyl, is to see the beauty of it on coloured vinyl spinning round on your turntable, isn't it? But maybe it's not. So please do tell me down in the comments if you keep records sealed. I'd love to know what your motives are for that. I find that sort of stuff interesting. I mean, back in the day, back in the 70s in the UK, there was only really two major retailers that kept sealed albums where the record was actually in the sleeve on the racks, and that was HMV and Virgin, from what I can remember. Normally, if you went into a normal or an independent record store, the racks would be filled with empty sleeves, and you would take your empty sleeve up to the counter when you wanted to buy it, and they would go behind the counter and pull out the record and put it in your sleeve and hand you the record. It wasn't sealed or anything, so we didn't even have sealed records back in the day. In the UK anyway. And another thing is hype stickers. Hype stickers, I didn't even know that was a thing that people kept until I started watching YouTube videos, and now I'm collecting I'm keeping my hype stickers. I keep them in the app. I normally put them in the inside sleeve of the albums, but I don't really know why I do it. I'm just doing it because everyone else is. I suppose if you've got multiple copies of a same album, you can tell what it is by the hype sticker, but apart from that, there doesn't seem to be any reason. It just normally tells you what version of it is and a couple of songs that are on it. And so I do keep the hype stickers now, but they are sometimes quite tricky to get off of the plastic when you do have a sealed album. And if I rip one, when I'm trying to take it off, I'm not bothered about it. I don't really care. But if one comes off in one piece, then I do keep it and stick it in the album. So if you are into keeping albums sealed, a lot of people say that they keep one copy sealed and one copy to play. But I'm interested in the reason why you're keeping the one copy sealed. So please tell me about that down in the comments. With regards to repackaging old albums, either with remastering or remixing or box sets or whatever it is, there always seems to be people queuing up to shout out cash grab, which to me is like an absolute nonsense. No such thing as a cash grab. It's just stuff that is for sale, just like in any other walk of life, where you're perfectly at liberty to say, no thank you, I don't want that. It's not a cash grab. If a motor company put out an updated model of one of their cars, they've updated the spec or something like that, no one shouts out cash grab, do they? They either say I want that or I don't want it. And it's the same with records, but people seem to like shouting out cash grab, especially people who aren't interested in what it is that is for sale. But they are just things for sale. And to be absolutely honest, I want more products. I want there to be more Paul McCartney archive collections. I want them to finish that the coloured vinyl, the Paul McCartney coloured vinyl series that they started in 2017, which they seem to have completely forgotten about by now. I want there to be an enhanced box set for every Beatles album with a good stereo remix and a nice book and some outtakes. I want them to carry on with the John Lennon Ultimate mixes collection. I want those to keep coming out. I want there to be some George Harrison albums coming out, you know, with remixes on them and some unreleased material. I'm up for all this stuff, and if they're going to put them out, then I'm happy to pay for it. I don't feel, you know, ripped off by it, because it's stuff that I want. I want to buy it. And, you know, so it goes on. You know, I think that maybe, you know, I'd much rather have it like this than how it used to be in the olden days, when nothing ever came out. At least now, you know, there's lots of stuff that is coming out, and we can either say yes please or no thank you. Much better that way than for it to not be available whatsoever. And I think, you know, if Apple, you know, put out a gold-plated turd with the word Beatles running through it, I might, you know, think twice about buying something like that. Although if it was like an unreleased remastered turd, I'd probably be up for it. But seriously, I'm glad that I don't have to think about how much money that I've spent on this obsession over the years. I have no idea what it would be, but I guess it would be quite a big number, and I'm glad that I don't have to think about it. But Mrs. Beatley Tone is very understanding. I'm very lucky in that way, that I don't have to like squirrel things away and hide things from her, or not tell her how much things cost and stuff like that. And, you know, I would never get into debt for any of this stuff. You know, I'm not going anywhere near, you know, the All Things Must Pass Uber box. You know, not only because of its ridiculous price, but also the fact that it doesn't contain anything I want. I don't want gnomes or beads or anything like that. But, you know, if it comes to music, then I do want this sort of stuff. So, you know, if you have to, you know, keep things a bit under your hat, or secretive, or hide things away from your partner, or not tell them exactly how much you're paying for stuff, do tell me about it down in the comments if you want to, and let's hope that your partners don't read the comments. Okay, well, that is pretty much it. Julia, this one was for you. I don't know if I've got anywhere near what you were expecting for this topic, but I've talked about my mentality as a Beatles fan. Everyone else, if you want to tell me about your mentality as a Beatles fan, what you buy, what you won't buy, where your limits are, where you draw the line, what your collecting habits, anything you want to tell me, or anything you want to say about this video, please do so down in the comments. You know, I'd love to hear from you. You know, I read everything and I respond to everything. So thanks very much, everyone, for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And our Beatles fans start raving bonkers. Too bloody right we are. I'll see you next time. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.